Have you ever had an unexplainable moment with music? Was there a time when a song felt completely synchronistic in your life? Was that a coincidence? Or was it a coexistence? Today, I invite you on an extraordinary journey into the realm of harmonious encounters where music and spirituality intertwine. Join me as we unravel this deep and mystical connection between those two things, music and spirituality. It's all right here on Music Ghost Stories. Happy New Year and welcome to Music Ghost Stories. I'm your host, Donnie Ingram, and as we step into a brand new chapter, it's the perfect time to reflect on the unexpected magic that music brings into our lives. Today I'm joined by Aaron Sprinkle, a music producer and artist whose career has been defined by a deep love for sound and an unrelenting pursuit of creativity. In this episode, we'll uncover serendipitous moments that shaped Aaron's journey, and we'll explore on how technology and vibe sort of correlate in the music creation process. We'll talk about things such as familiarity and how our life experiences are what create this magic that surrounds our perception of the music we're hearing. Before we dive in, let's tune into today's Mystery Sound segment, where we explore the fascinating ways sound can play tricks on our minds. Today we're going to explore the phantom words illusion. Are you familiar with the ink blot test, where a subject is shown a series of ink blots and asked to describe what they see? What if this was possible not with just the visuals, but with audio as well? Here's how it works. When you hear a loop of repeated syllables or fragments of words, your brain tries to make sense of what is initially perceived as chaos. It's as if your brain can't handle that randomness, so it starts making connections to impose meaning. Suddenly you think you hear distinct words or phrases, words that actually aren't there. Before I explain more, let's try it out. I'm going to play a clip of seemingly random sounds. Close your eyes, focus in a little bit, and try to find what you hear. See if there's any words or phrases that pop out to you. Okay, so what did you hear? Some people might catch words like downhill, countdown, or even something more wild. Others might hear totally different things, or nothing at all. The magic of this illusion lies in how our brains are hardwired to find patterns. Even though the sound of the clip is just a jumble of syllables, this one being Hilda, H-I-L-D-A, your brain doesn't favor uncertainty. It's like it works overtime to create order, sometimes pulling out familiar words or phrases. Interestingly, and this sort of goes back to the ink blot test thing, what you hear might also depend on your mood, your previous experiences, your memories, or even what you've been thinking about lately, what's been on the top of your mind. It's like an auditory path to your subconscious. Okay. I think this mystery sound is really appropriate for today's conversation. So let's kick off this new year and let's dive in. Hey, Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, so good to be here.
Tell our listeners a little bit about who you are.
My name is Aaron Sprinkle. I am a 50-year-old male human who has been making music in some capacity since I was in like third grade. I've been in the music industry professionally for over 30 years. And the main role that I've been in is a music producer and songwriter. And then I've also been a recording and touring artist as well, off and on in that. and a recording engineer and mixer. I've hacked my way through just about every role in recording. Most of the people that know who I am as a producer would think of me as an emo producer. From the early 2000s on was my emo run of Amberland, Acceptance, Emery, The Almost, Pedro the Lion. And I've worked with One Republic, and I've worked with some artists on the CBA side, Jeremy Camp, Cutlass, Hawk Nelson, Thousand Foot Crutch. And then I put out a decent amount of records of my own under my name with my bands Rose Blossom Punch and Fair. And yeah.
What was the moment where you said you became more deeply attached to music?
I was raised around music. Both of my parents played guitar, sang, were really into music at a level that I didn't really understand until later on, especially for my dad. It was just this sort of self-discovery thing that my parents were born again Christian ex-hippies, and they didn't listen to any music that was not considered Christian music. Fortunately, the era that I was little in, there was some really incredibly great Christian music that I'm really glad I was raised on. But in third grade, I was exposed to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by accident, particularly the song Lovely Rita. I didn't even understand what was happening to me then. I was in third grade, right? But it was a profound spiritual experience for me. And it really is the anchor of what the trajectory of the rest of my life was. And the feeling I got from hearing that song in those headphones on that Walkman is a feeling that I've never stopped chasing in making my own music, trying to get a sliver of that feeling back.
Was that from your parents' collection?
No. So this kid, a lot older than me, was walking by with a Walkman, and I'd never seen a Walkman before. And I was like, what is that? And, this is a long time ago. I'm old. And he was kind of a jerk to me, and he was like, none of your business, blah, blah, blah. And so I waited for him to go back into his grandparents' house and then leave without it. And then I went and asked his grandparents if I could see the Walkman. And they were real sweet, and they sat me down, and they just randomly grabbed a cassette off of their table and popped it in and hit play. My interest was in the technology, right? That's what got me there. But then as soon as I heard the music, I didn't care about the Walkman at all anymore. Like it was this whole other thing. And I remember literally running home to tell my parents about this. And my dad's favorite band, is an understatement, is the Beatles. But he wasn't currently listening to them at the time because of this conversion experience and sort of the culture around that. So I later on found out his story and how it pertained to the Beatles and him learning how to play guitar and all this stuff. But he was thrilled, to say the least, that I had this experience. But yeah, that's how I heard it.
Real quick, did you know that Music Ghost Stories has a group on Facebook? You can join and share any coincidences that you've experienced involving music in some way. We want to hear your story and how music has played a synchronistic role in your life. So, with each episode right here on this podcast, there's a description, and there's notes involving each episode in some way. I try to put things that are unique to the episode, like a playlist of the songs that are referenced, for example. But also, you'll find the link that takes you to that community on Facebook. Check it out, click it when we're done, and I'll meet you over there. All right. I understand that your parents had recently converted, but I didn't know if they had albums that they didn't want to throw away because they're like assets in a way.
Right. They didn't have anything in the house.
That's really cool that technology brought you into a new world of music. It's interesting how that's almost like a trajectory for so much more of your time here.
Right. I've never really thought about this, but the technology aspect of it is probably pretty important too, because technology has always been a part of my story as well, even since I was young. The magic of it to me and my pursuit of it. And, when I was in sixth grade, fifth grade, my uncle gave me a Commodore 64, and I taught myself how to program in BASIC, and I would make my own video games, and I spent hours and hours doing that too. And so when computers and music came together for me, which was really about 99 and 98, 99, somewhere around there is when I really started making music with computers. It was a very natural process for me.
I feel like you were primed at the advent of this really pivotal moment in music. A lot of people were closing their doors, and I feel like you were just right at the right mindset at the right time, and you were an asset for other people for the next phase of what music would become.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, that I feel grateful that I was able to make a lot of records to tape before I transitioned to using computers. And unfortunately, there was a short stint of ADATs in between those two, which I don't have very many fond memories of. But just having some frame of reference as to what is being emulated by everything now, that I've used all these pieces of gear and these things to make quite a bit of material, I feel grateful for. I think that there's probably some advantage, but I think there's probably some advantage of not knowing too. I don't think it's superior in any way, but I'm grateful for it. I like it.
I think more tangible things are coming back into swing. There's vinyl coming back. I'm starting to see more of a craving for things that are physical, because there is beauty in being able to touch and hold things that are musical. Whereas the computer, I don't know. I went through this whole thing with, last night I was talking to my buddy. Are you familiar with the McGurk effect?
Mm-mm.
I'll send you a link, but
it sounds like something I would be excited to learn about.
BBC did a report on it, but they had a guy side by side, same guy, same face, two images. And one was saying, it was a close up of his mouth, and he was saying ba, like B-A.
Mm-hmm.
The second face was him saying fa, F-A, F-A. The entire time they played an audio clip, but whatever one you looked at, you heard. So you're like, how is the audio changing when I'm changing?
Right.
And the McGurk effect
Yes.
is our visual cues actually influence our auditory perception. Right. I said, what if I could use this to my advantage? So I started finding stock footage, and I was like, what if I found one that like really vibed with whatever I'm working on and put it up on a screen and found a looping point? And then I found a software that I actually had already that could pick up A and B on a video and just keep looping that section.
Oh, cool.
I realized what I'm aiming for sonically sometimes is way different than, I'll just look at the screen and I'll be like, oh, this doesn't fit, and I'll just change it.
So when I had my studio in Seattle, the compound, I had a movie playing 24/7 of some sort, like constantly. And a lot of times I would match it to what I was feeling or wanting to feel. Sometimes it was my feeling, and sometimes it was the vibe of what we were working on. But I would just pick a movie and just loop it. And I got that from J.R. McNeely. He mixes with a movie on with the sound turned off. Sometimes it's just this peripheral vibe that you're giving yourself. I close my eyes a lot when I'm working, and I actually go one step further, and I've been doing this for so long that I can do it really seamlessly. But I go into fan mode when I'm listening, which is what I call it. But I listen as if I couldn't change it. I listen as if it was presented to me as a finished product. And if something's sticking out to me or feeling off in that mode, then I know I need to fix it. If it's not, then I probably don't. If it's making me feel something as a fan, it's great. But if there's something poking out that's distracting me from the feeling it's giving me, then that's something I need to fix. But I think going back to the tangibility of music, the physical, I think something that I heard someone discuss, this was a while ago too, but there are generations of people now that are not babies that don't understand the concept of owning music, of possessing music, right? Because it's all just streaming. If you don't own the Spotify catalog, you just pay monthly to access it. And if you stop paying, you don't have access to it anymore. And that's why I think there's a couple record shops in Seattle that I've noticed over the years, their CD section is expanding. And the demographic of the people in their CD section is very young. I don't think it's a new phenomenon as far as I remember discovering, as in the 90s, really being into and discovering aspects of the 70s that I thought were really intriguing, and what an influence the 70s had on the Seattle music scene and even my music and stuff. And so go that looking just before your time thing and finding things in there that intrigue and inspire you. But CDs, vinyl, cassettes, all those things have grown all over the last few years as far as the market for them. And they're not at a level where they're going to replace streaming, but the fact that they're growing is encouraging to me. I think there's something so beautiful in buying an album, whatever format it is, holding it in your hand, opening the packaging, reading the notes, listening to the songs in order. And that's an experience that's been lost from streaming. And I love streaming. I love the convenience of it. I've got these playlists I've made that match with the mood I'm in. I put them on, or a record, just yell at Alexa and she starts playing whatever I want. I get it. I just think it's fun to see young people discovering this other side of it.
One thing on this podcast that I really aim to bring a spotlight toward is listening to music more intently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened with streaming and having this archive of music is you access music when you have access to the internet. The cool thing about streaming is that there's a mood associated with music. There's a vibe. And a lot of times you can just go in and tune into a playlist of whatever mood that you're in.
Right.
What is it about vibe? What is it about mood? And what do you think it is about music that achieves that connection to our inner, deeper emotions?
I don't know. I'm one of these people that doesn't want to unearth too much because I like the magic. I like the mystery. I don't really want to know why with certain things. Certain things I have to know why, or I can't stop until I know why. But when things feel mystical to me, I often don't want to figure it out. But what I do know, and what I have figured out over the years, is emotions rule me 100%. I love feeling my feelings, and music makes me feel a way that nothing else does. And I can go back to a song and get that same feeling again over and over. Basically self-medicate to manipulate my own emotions. And the strength of these emotions, whether it be joy or melancholy or sadness or anger or whatever, is unbelievable. And it actually brings me to something you talked about earlier, which is passive listening. I can't passively listen to music. If it's not something I intentionally put on, or even a station I put on, let's say, in a radio sort of environment, or if it's too quiet for me to hear it, I'd rather not have any music on. I'd rather just there be nothing. But why does music do that? I don't know. And there's probably some really incredible scientific explanation that you could whittle down to a quantum level if you wanted to, but I don't really care about that. I'm just chasing those feelings. The reason I discovered fan mode is because I first discovered producer mode while listening to things that I had been listening to for years. I accidentally turned producer mode on a record that I'd been listening to for like 15 years, and I heard all these problems with it. And I was like, no, you need to turn that off. The vocals are pitchy right there, or the guitar is out of tune right there. So I thought, what if I did that in the reverse while I was making records? And that's how that was discovered. But you can ruin like treasured music that you've listened to your whole life if you turn producer mode on and listen to it.
I don't think I've ever dissected music in a way where I'm listening to it like I could actually change things.
When you listen to a record that someone else made, you don't question whether or not it's finished. You don't question whether or not it could be better. You're sort of accepting the music is finished. And I try all the time to get artists I'm working with to listen that way. Like, pretend this isn't your band. Pretend this is finished and just listen to it. It's a completely different posture that you're approaching. It's if you had The Cure's pictures of you open in a session and you were making that song and the vocals were open, what would you do to them? The answer to that question is I would have ruined that song if I had it in front of me. And then it got me thinking differently about how to make music with computers. It does help to humanize. For me, it helps to humanize things. This artist I'm working with who's 23, he was asking, when you did records to tape, like, how did you do that? And like, you listened differently. You listened based on what you could and could not change about it. I couldn't nudge this and that around, so you didn't listen for that. You listened for things being wildly out of time, and then you fixed them. Or just you listened for how it made you feel.
It makes me wonder if our threshold has changed as humans throughout time, if we're more sensitive to imperfection because of how tight music has gotten. But I think what happens is that has already happened. And that's why this conversation comes back up about vibe. And
Right.
there's this interesting thing that you just brought up here, this theme about the relationship between music and technology that I think is really interesting in the sense that you just said technology can ruin vibe, or your access to technology can ruin vibe.
Absolutely. And I think that's always been the case, though, to some extent. If you're looking at a pure representation of three people playing music in a room together, and then you start adding technology to it, you can enhance or really break down what's happening there. I can go back and probably find records where I was just way too on the grid, and I cringe at some of that stuff. But my motivation was to try to make it sound current and relevant. I hear Michael Bublé Christmas songs this time of year, and I hear hard auto-tune on some of the notes of his voice, and he does not need that. But it makes it sound more expensive or more professional or more glossy. I don't believe people listen for things like that. I think people are mostly binary with music listening. They like it or they don't like it. They're not going, I really like this song except for the vocals, you know. They're experiencing it at a different level than we're making it. And I think it's the analogy I like to use with this is you see these people with these hi-fi rigs that cost more than the studio that the record was made in that they're listening to it on. And I think if you're thinking about how people are listening to the music, then you're probably going to save yourself a lot of trouble if you can start listening that way. And the vibe that people, you know, are looking for in what you're giving them. They don't care about the things that we really focus on as producers and writers and stuff as much as you think. We have to care about things that they don't because we're trying to crack this code of what compels them to like the music. But I think fan mode has got to be able to turn that on.
When you say that your emotions really dictate a lot for you personally, and music really plays this big role on your emotions, would you say that comes from the instruments for you, like the actual music composition, or do you think it's the way that the story is told and the lyrics are presented?
So if I had to put things in a list of hierarchy, melody is number one for me. And not just obviously the melody, but the way that it interacts with the harmony, right? Number one. And then I think it would have to be like tied would be the lyrics and then the vibe of the production, the vibe that the production is giving me. Not so much the specific instrumentation, but the way that instrumentation is presented
Hmm.
is what's most important. I don't care what instruments are there. I care how the way that they are being presented to me makes me feel. And some songs I love so much, and I've never even thought about the lyrics before, ever. And then some songs make me cry every time I hear them, and it's just because of the lyrics and the melody and everything together. I wouldn't be like, this song is amazing. The lyrics are so good. I don't really like anything else about it. It's got to be the whole package for me. But instrumentation is not, I don't think it's real high. I think there's a way to get your feeling across that works really well with certain instruments. So it's going to be the most effective way to get that across is to use these instruments and this configuration with these types of tones and tuning and playing and all that stuff. But I think what struck me about Lovely Rita was the production and the melody. I wasn't thinking about the lyrics of that song at all. Song's borderline dirty if you really read the lyrics. I didn't pick up on that in third grade. It was this other universe it transported me to when I heard it. This other reality, sonically, and then the melody. Yeah, melody is the biggest mystery of all to me with this. It almost seems like it's programmed into our DNA or something. It's a trip.
I wonder if melody and song is just floating out there. And when we're writing music or we're writing these songs, we tap into that in a way that's almost, and I always wonder if it's inevitable. It's just going to happen out of
Yeah,
our control.
I always say the best songs I've ever written were discovered. They weren't written. You know what I mean? I found them. I unearthed them. Because that's how it feels more to me than me really calculating this invention. It feels like a discovery process. And what it is I'm discovering, the ether of why and all that, I don't want to know. I have no interest in that. I don't want to see the wizard behind the curtain. As far as like my spiritual beliefs go, I'm an ex-evangelical Christian, agnostic atheist, but I like to hold some place for some woo-woo, like that there's just some totally unexplained and unexplainable and we'll never know and we'll never get to know stuff out there. And music it's like music, love, all these things like that I don't want the mystery to be revealed. I just want to enjoy it. I just want to be present in it. And the fact that I get to be a small part of the universe of music making is I can't even believe it when I really think about it. It's such a gift, such a privilege. And I don't know what I'd do without it though. I feel like I would wither away into nothing if I couldn't. Because I say this all the time, but the reason I make music is because I can't not. I can't not. That was the only motive for me, was I couldn't not make it. It wasn't like to get famous or rich or whatever, which thank God, because I would be so disappointed right now if that was the truth.
You said you feel like you're discovering.
Hmm.
And what I'm wondering is, how do you tap into that?
That's the hard part. When you do music to pay your bills, you have to sometimes do it whether you're really feeling it or not. I feel like everybody has ADD now, but I was diagnosed with it as an adult. And over time, I figured out how to use it as a superpower rather than a problem. And the trick to it for me is just, if I can avoid working when I'm not feeling it, that's 90% of it right there. Because when I am feeling it, I can get a lot done in a short amount of time. A song in 15 minutes. I can work really fast. And that power gets fatigued when I try to push through. I don't have those really clear moments of super focus. I'll go through a period where I feel like I can't write anything for 2 weeks, and then I'll write 5 songs in 2 hours or whatever.
I love what you're saying about that too. It sort of alludes to being present.
That's exactly what it is. It wasn't until, really the last 4 or 5 years that I got into mindfulness type stuff. I tapped into enough of it to really have a paradigm shift in how I see things. I was able to see that I was constantly trying to not be present. And the only thing that forced me to be was making music. But now I'm constantly I somehow shifted to where I'm chasing the present all the time and not the past or the future. They say depression is focusing on the past and anxiety is focusing on the future. That's, to me, the definition of the antithesis of presence, right? And being present.
Is there a tool or something that's helped you shift your mindset?
Meditation, definitely. But the honest and blunt part is I was unable to tap into this stuff until I deconverted from Christianity. Walking away from that, and then a couple years later, getting out of a very long marriage that I should have got out of years before I did. Those were two huge shifts. It kind of gave me the permission to seek being present. One of the big takeaways for me with evangelical Christianity was the present doesn't matter, other than that kind of binary switch of like, are you saved or are you not saved? Is your name in the book of life or not? Beyond that, what matters is what's going to happen for the eternity after this blink of an eye life that you're living. So when my belief system changed to be actually the present is all I've ever had and all I ever will have, then it's easy to shift your focus onto the present. Because you're like, this is how it is. This is it right now. And it's almost like you can stop time in a way, because right now is all I have. It doesn't matter when right now is. It's always all I have. And it's really exciting and fun. And I struggled with an alcohol addiction for years, and it literally just went away when I had this shift. And I realized that the reason that I was drinking was to escape now. That was the whole reason. Because I didn't want to be now. I wanted to be somewhere else. I wanted to be not here. And I'm pointing at my head right now for people that can't see me. And when I wasn't afraid to be, I was terrified of being right here. And when I wasn't afraid to be anymore, I don't think about alcohol anymore, ever. It's a non-issue. It's different when you're actually unburdened than just have the tools to abstain. Those are two different experiences. One of the big gifts I was given with my deconversion was this freedom from certainty or needing to know things. That I don't know is actually the most freeing thing to me in my anecdotal experience. When I was taught, or I at least perceived the teachings that I was given, that we have to know the truth. We have to know the exact, actual, real truth. And this is it. And if you don't know it, you're screwed. And that's a very stressful, but that's a lot of personal responsibility.
What's interesting is you had this moment of realization when I asked how you tap into that, and a couple things that you mentioned, one being meditation. I'm wondering if that helps give you that clarity, being used to thinking a certain way, and that sort of freed you in a new.
It helped get used to thinking a different way. Is what meditation did. It helped me experience the world in a different way, experience my reality in a different way, the universe, whatever you want to call it, in a way that seemed honestly taboo from where I came from. but so much more wonder, so much more mystery, so much this endless possibility of experiences out there.
Something I will share for people listening is I did another thing with this guy, Jason Snell, and he uses something called a Muse headband, which is just like a portable EEG that hooks up to an iPhone app. And he's been on GitHub and worked with other code developers to essentially take that and use it as a MIDI device. And he would DJ with nothing but this headband. And his brainwave state will control all the loops inside of Ableton, all the automation inside of Ableton, and even the light show.
Wow.
And he talked, yeah, give it a listen if you have some time in the car.
That is cool. Yes, I'm into that.
He talks about
That's
experiences and transcending and all that stuff. So afterwards, he helped me get a Muse headband affordably on the used market. He knows which one to get, and
yeah,
I got one for like maybe $89 on Facebook Marketplace or something, shipped to me. I paired it up, and I started using it, and I've started meditating. Venturing out on my own, I will say, doing it the first few times, and even sometimes, depending on the mood, it's not very comfortable. It is, there's...
Oh, it's incredibly uncomfortable.
It was scary.
Oh, yeah. My heart would race and stuff when I first started doing it.
Yes.
Because it's such a foreign thing. It was like, what the hell is going on right now?
And then what's cool about this device is it gives you all the analytics afterwards. I think guys like you and I appreciate seeing the data.
That would be sick. Yeah.
And I started to realize like how I was finding comfort in these situations. When you said that you found comfort in the present, I totally understand what you're talking about. I think that's a really cool part of your journey. And as far as being present, I just want to say I do appreciate you spending this moment here, and recording this conversation for people to hear. I think it's really nice. Have you ever had a coincidence involving music?
This is one of those terrible things where, yes, 100%, but I can't think of any specific examples.
Okay.
But I'd love to hear some. If you have any, I'd love to hear them.
There's a couple good ones. If you listen to the introductory episode, I share one that happened with me and my dad, who had recorded demos on ADATs, by the way. I was transferring them into Pro Tools, and there was a track on there where it was just the acoustic guitar, but then it cut out. This is after my dad passed away, by the way. But the recording was maybe a decade before, who knows when. But as I was transferring it, the guitar track cut out. And then his voice comes in. He must have had a Shure SM57 with a delay on the way in. And he was kind of like singing this weird mantra sounding thing. Just like how that song on Sgt. Pepper kicks in, that vocals grabs you and like right off the bat in this weird ethereal way. Was just like that. So it grabbed me and I was like, whoa, what is going on? And then he just says, goodbye, I love you.
Whoa.
Do you know Kevin Kline from Valley Heart? Have you heard of him? He shared a cool experience too that I like on his episode, which people can check out. I like that one too, about one of the songs that he was working on, and they flew out to play it at a wedding, but on the way back home, after learning and practicing the song over and over again, this song just became the theme of this trip to Nashville or wherever they went. And he said it was also weird because there was like this huge blizzard that made everything much more complicated, like more of an adventure.
Right.
And they got there, they played the wedding, everyone else made it there, and it was like all this snow. It was just, how snow's like quiet and everything's just like silent. It was like that. And then they went to fly back home, and at the gate, at the terminal, while he's boarding the plane, guess what's playing over the speakers in the airport is that song.
What?
Yeah, as he's boarding the plane to go back home. It was Moon River by Audrey Hepburn. And he was like, how weird is that? That after this entire adventure, we're getting on the plane to leave, and then it's just playing,
song is playing
through the intercom.
I actually had a thing like that happen to me today. Kind of trippy. But Isaac from The Fray, the lead singer of The Fray, lives on the island I live on, and he's a buddy of mine. And he hit me up this morning, and he's like, can you please come up to this cabin and help me engineer? I'm doing a cover. I need help engineering. He's doing like a Instagram post of it, right? And he's asking me about what I'm working on and all this stuff. And I was telling him that I'm having a record mixed by TLA right now. And he's like, who? And I said, Tom Lord-Alge. And he's like, oh, yeah. And then he was like, what is he known for? The first thing I said to him was, oh, he mixed One Headlight by Wallflowers. He looks at me and he goes, that's the song I'm about to cover today. That literally happened to me an hour and a half ago. I was there and came right here to get on this podcast.
That's a great story. If your music could send one message to the world, what would it be?
You are not alone.
That's a really good theme.
Yeah, music sees the depths of me. Things that I can't even describe with words. I feel seen.
That's beautiful. That's why language and music have a relationship too, because there is tone in language. There's inflections in the voice, and they mean different things. I was just listening to a professor. She said, there's two different ways to say, I haven't been on a date in a while, or I haven't been on a date in a while. And she talks about tone and music. And music, I think, is the use of those inflections and tone and in the context where language isn't enough.
Right. Oh, and that's great. Yeah, my oldest son, Elliot, will be 30 next week, or actually this week, is autistic, and he was born with perfect pitch. And like he can hear if things are cents off, right? And I discovered it when he was 4. But he, with his autism and his OCD, is how a lot of his autism expresses in OCD. Pretty severe sometimes. It's awful. He has gone through phases where he overanalyzes the pitch patterns in people's speech when they're talking to him. As someone on the spectrum, he has a hard time naturally inferring what people are implying with their speech, but because of his perfect pitch, he would start to sort of analyze their note patterns of how they were speaking to him. And it really messed with his head for a while. I felt so bad for him, but it was also so fascinating at the same time.
Yeah, talk about being able to have a superpower. Like, my goodness.
Yeah. Like, he could tell when the song was barely sped up on the radio and things like that. It would drive him crazy.
Yeah, just that idea of listening to the pitch in someone's voice and analyzing that and interpreting that on a super technical level.
Yeah.
Would be so distracting. That reminds me of you listening to music at a low volume in the background.
Yes.
You're just like, turn it off.
Yes.
Like he might enjoy rap music or something where there's like more of a monotone.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
That's so funny. All right, cool. And finally, what would the ultimate episode of Music Ghost Stories podcast be?
The first thing that came into my head was like, I don't know, some exploration of how, this is so cliche and so hilarious, but I would be glued to it. How the recipe of John, Paul, Ringo, and George Martin, how did that turn into what it turned into? Because to me, that everything always back to the Beatles for me. Eventually, I find something there. And even if it goes before the Beatles, it comes back up to the Beatles. And I know that they're just the most cliche thing to talk about or whatever, but that is the most mysterious thing to me. How did that happen? Like, how did that evolve into what it evolved into? And that relationship they had. If you could get Paul to talk about it, or you could get somebody that analyzed it and cracked the code and figured out what happened. But that is one of those things that would definitely fall under the category of something I both want to know and don't want to know at the same time.
Yeah, it falls into that thing. Yeah, don't meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Don't want to know. I
like,
will say,
I gotta look, but I don't want to. I know I'm going to be bummed.
Have you ever heard of that story of Paul McCartney? I think it was Paul McCartney going around like on the streets because he had wrote the song Yesterday.
He asked everyone for something like a year what song it was. And then finally, I think John was like, it's your song, bro. Finish it.
That kind of goes exactly back into that whole idea of someone's already wrote this. That's why I'm so familiar with it. Maybe that was him being like, did I discover this or is this already out there?
I think a really important thing for me is I move towards familiarity and classicism. I don't pull away from it. And a lot of people are like, that sounds like this. That melody sounds like this guitar part from this famous song or whatever. And that makes me go, oh, then we're definitely using it. And a lot of people are like, oh, we can't do that because it's too familiar. But everything we're talking about right now together is familiarity.
Yeah.
Is you have some previous experience to relate what you're listening to, right? I think the fun is where you take something familiar from over here and something familiar from over here and you put them together. That's where it gets really fun and interesting. When I'm making music, I don't really think about these things. I don't analyze them, but I think that familiarity, that classicism, is why we like stuff. So why would you shy away from that? You know what I mean? I think there's this desire in some, especially young musicians, to be completely original.
Yeah.
And I hate to break it to you, but that does not exist.
Right.
And it never will. And so you might as well just embrace it.
Something else I learned about you is that your brother was the drummer of Dead Poetic.
Yeah. I produced Dead Poetic's second album. It was called New Medicines, I believe.
You remember in, what was that? Bury the Differences, where the guitars were hard panned and it's like dan, 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 and everything like kicks in and then it cuts again. The other guitar's hard panned. Okay. So the story I want to share with you that I think is hilarious is the best man at my wedding, my cousin Justin. He drove, this is when we were younger teens, and he just got his license, had this beat up old Nissan, right? And he's like, dude, I just bought this record. And we put it in. We're playing it, and it kicks in, right? And I'm like, dude, this is sick. He's like, right? And all of a sudden, it just cuts. I was like, is that the song? And then it just kicks back in, right? And we look at each other and go, that was awesome. And it turns out that he had a blown speaker on one side.
I love it.
And
that is amazing.
We had no idea.
Now I wish I would have had a blown speaker too, because that sounds like it would have been pretty sick.
It was just so funny, right? When we found out later that it was actually like an intended, it was so weird. But we looked at each other, was that the whole song? Like, is it over?
I love it.
It just blows us away. When I found out that your brother played, I was like, dude, I have to make a note just to share that story with him, because I thought it's something that he and I will never forget. And I don't know, that just happened to be the record that you worked on, which is
I'm so glad you shared that with me.
That is so funny.
Makes me so happy.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate your time and you sharing all these personal moments involving music. And enjoy your holiday season.
Thank you for time. Likewise. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you. Yeah.
All right. I'll
Have
see
a good
you.
one.
See you, Aaron. As the year turns, so too does our opportunity to tune into something greater. Aaron's story reminds us that music isn't just sound, it's a bridge that brings everything into the present. This New Year's season, I encourage you to let the music guide you. Let its melodies awaken nostalgia, inspire dreams, and bring clarity. Because if music has taught us anything, it's that the simplest notes can hold the most profound truths. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Music Ghost Stories. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review wherever you're listening right now. It's free, and it's the best way to support this podcast. As we step into another year of discovery, let's carry forward the magic of sound, the warmth of memory, and the beauty of the present moment. Until next time, everyone, though this episode's over, keep listening.
Goodbye. I love you.